They found her barefoot, standing in blood. A 16-year-old girl, her face pale, her hands shaking, a kitchen knife still clutched tight like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Lying at her feet, Robert Harper, local football coach, town hero, dead. And right behind her, her mother, screaming. It should have been a tragedy no one could explain. But Emily Harper, she wasn't confused. She wasn't hysterical. She looked the officer straight in the eyes and said, "He wouldn't stop. I told her. No one believed me." This isn't a story about a murder. It's a story about a secret buried behind a white picket fence. A girl screaming for help. A mother who refused to listen. And what happens when silence is deadlier than violence? Welcome to Deadly Secrets. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to follow more true crime cases that will leave you stunned. Thunder rumbled low across Willow Creek, rolling like distant drums through the quiet Ohio suburb. At exactly 1:12 a.m., the scream cut through the storm. It came from a modest two-story house on Maple Street, a place with a white picket fence, trimmed hedges, and a welcome mat that read, "Home is where the heart is." Inside, the heart had been ripped apart. In the kitchen, a man lay sprawled on the linoleum floor, his shirt soaked in crimson. The knife, an 8-inch chef's blade, was still clutched in the girl's trembling hand. Her body shook, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something primal. Emily Harper, 16, 5'2", a straight-A student with a quiet voice and a love of landscape painting. The knife in her hand didn't belong, but neither did the pain in her eyes. Oh my God, what happened here? 6 hours earlier, the house had been silent. Rain tapped against the windows. The television murmured softly in the living room, tuned to a cooking show no one was watching. Susan Harper, 38, had pulled another double shift at Willow Creek Hospital. She wouldn't be home until late again. Robert was in the den, nursing a glass of bourbon. To the rest of the town, he was Robert Harper, the charming high school football coach, 6'2", broad-shouldered, a smile made for small-town heroism. He'd led Willow Creek High to 3 state finals in 5 years. He hosted barbecues, mentored kids, gave speeches about accountability and character. But Emily knew the truth. She knew what lived behind the charm, behind the grin. She heard it in the way he shut the door behind him when Susan wasn't home. She saw it in the way he stared too long, stood too close. She'd heard the floorboards creak at 11:47 p.m., like clockwork, followed by the slow turn of her doorknob. Months earlier, Emily had been someone else entirely. Her hazel eyes used to sparkle when she spoke about art school. Her bedroom walls were covered in sketches of wheat fields, mountain ridges, dusky skies. She kept a scrapbook filled with ticket stubs, pressed flowers, and clippings from magazines. She wasn't just smart, she was alive. Then something changed. Her teachers noticed first. Ms. Clara Evans, her English instructor, remembered it like a punch to the gut. She stopped raising her hand. She stopped laughing. It was like someone turned the light off inside her. Emily started skipping art club. Her grades slipped from the top of her class to C's. She stopped eating lunch with friends. She came home straight after school, hoodie pulled tight, backpack clutched like a shield. And worst of all, she stopped painting. Her easel sat in the corner, untouched. Inside, she was drowning, but on the outside, just a quiet teen going through a phase. What no one saw, what no one wanted to see, was the predator inside her home. Robert had never laid a hand on Susan. He knew better, but Emily. She was vulnerable. Her father had left years ago, and Robert had stepped in, saved them, provided for them. He was the man who brought food to the table, who paid off the mortgage, who convinced Susan that teenage girls were moody and dramatic when she raised concerns. Susan loved her daughter, but she was tired, burned out from long shifts, overdue bills, and years of single motherhood, Robert seemed like a blessing until he wasn't. When Emily finally spoke up, it was a whisper. They were sitting in the living room, the television flickering silently behind them. Susan was sorting laundry. Emily's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above the sound of the dryer, "I need to tell you something." Susan didn't look up. "What is it, honey?" Emily swallowed. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "It's Robert. He comes into my room at night when you're not home." Susan froze, a pair of socks still in her hand. "What?" Her voice was sharp, not confused, defensive. "He touches me," Emily whispered. "He's been doing it for months." Silence. Not the kind that offers space, but the kind that suffocates. Susan stood up slowly, blinking like she hadn't heard right. "Emily, that's a serious thing to say." "I know." "Are you sure? Maybe you misinterpreted. Maybe." "I know what happened." Susan's face hardened. "Robert would never do that. He loves us." Emily's voice cracked. "He doesn't love me, Mom. He hurts me." What happened next would become a defining memory in Emily's life, not the abuse itself, not the creaking floorboards or the midnight whispers, but that moment. The look in her mother's eyes. Doubt! Then disgust. Susan shook her head. "This is ridiculous. Why are you saying this? What have I done to deserve this?" Emily tried to reach for her. "I'm not lying." Susan stepped back. "You need help. Serious help. Stop trying to destroy this family." And with that, she turned and walked away. Later that night, Emily sat alone on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on the doorknob. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. Her hands trembled, but her face was calm, too calm. She opened her journal and wrote just one line. "Tonight, I stopped waiting for someone to save me." 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of pretending. 3 weeks of Robert smiling at neighbors, while Emily shrank behind locked doors. She stopped speaking at school, stopped answering texts. "Ms. Evans tried to reach out again, but Emily only nodded mutely and walked away. At night, she no longer cried. She watched memorized Robert's footsteps, the times he drank, the routes through the house. She noticed how long the knife drawer stuck when pulled too quickly, how loud the floor creaked by the back door, how Susan always returned home between 2 hours and 2:30 a.m. She wrote it all down. She wasn't planning murder, she was planning survival. But sometimes the two are closer than we think. The night of the storm, everything changed. Robert came home late, his shirt damp from the rain, his speech slurred from whiskey. Susan was still at the hospital. Emily heard his boots cross the tile, heard the familiar groan of the couch, heard the bottle clink against the glass. She stood in the hallway for a long time, the handle of her pocket knife warm in her hand. Then she walked into the kitchen. Robert turned toward her, blinking. "You're still up?" he asked, voice thick. Emily nodded. Her heart was a hammer in her chest. "I need to talk to you," she said. And Robert, smiling like always, stood up. "Of course, sweetheart, let's talk." But what happened next, what she said, what he did, what she did in return would be argued for months. By lawyers, by police, by people who'd never met her. All we know is what they found afterward. Robert Harper Coach, husband, town icon, lay dead on the floor. And Emily Harper stood over him, the silence finally broken. The morning after the blood, the street was quiet again. Willow Creek woke to news it couldn't process. Police tape across a white picket fence, reporters parked near the mailbox, neighbors craning their necks behind curtains, whispering the impossible. Emily Harper, the quiet girl with the sketchbook. She killed Robert. Nope, that can't be. Robert's a saint. But saints don't bleed out in kitchens, and teenage girls don't snap without a reason. The Harper home, once a model of small-town stability, had become something else entirely, a symbol of how good people ignore bad things until it's too late. 3 months earlier, that same house glowed with holiday lights. The lawn was manicured, the door decorated with a wreath. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and pine, and Robert stood by the fireplace, grinning for the family Christmas photo. Emily was beside him, rigid, arms crossed, eyes dead. He draped an arm around her shoulder. "Smile, kiddo." She flinched. Susan didn't notice, or didn't want to. She was the one holding the camera, smiling too brightly. She looked at the frame on the screen, satisfied. To Susan, this was the life she'd worked for. The house, the marriage, the image. She'd survived a divorce, survived raising a child alone. Robert made it easier. He brought in money, stability, admiration. He made her feel like she'd done it right the second time. So when the cracks formed, Susan closed her eyes. At school, Emily's absence grew louder than her presence. She no longer stayed late to paint. Her art portfolio sat untouched in a classroom cabinet. She stopped eating lunch in the courtyard, instead sitting in a janitor's closet near the back stairwell, her personal hiding spot. Clara Evans noticed. 52. Sharp eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. Clara had been teaching English at Willow Creek High for nearly 3 decades. She could spot emotional distress like a storm on the horizon. She saw it in Emily's poetry. "There's a man in the hallway who walks without sound. I hide in the wallpaper. I'm not safe when Mom's not around." Clara circled the verse in red ink, not as a correction, but as a cry for help. She called Emily in after class. "You doing okay?" Emily didn't look up, just tired. Clara's eyes narrowed. She gently reached out just a light hand on the girl's forearm. That's when she saw it. Bruising, faint, almost faded, but real. "Where did you get this?" Emily's response was automatic. "Gym class." The lie was too rehearsed. Clara didn't buy it. Clara filed a report with the school counselor that same day. A week later, a woman from Child Protective Services knocked on the Harpers' front door. Susan opened it, still in scrubs, bags under her eyes from a 14-hour shift. She looked at the clipboard, the badge, the smile that wasn't really a smile. "Hi, Mrs. Harper. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your daughter, Emily." Susan's shoulders stiffened. Why is something wrong? Her teacher noticed some changes, withdrawal, some poetry that raised concerns. And there was mention of bruising. Susan sighed, deep, like she'd heard this story before. "She's 16, she said. They get moody. And the bruises, gym class? She's always bumping into things." The social worker flipped a page. There were also concerns about your husband. And just like that, the warmth left Susan's voice. "Robert is a good man," she said. "He's done nothing but provide for us. This is absurd." The interview lasted 30 minutes. The file was opened, but nothing came of it. No further action taken. Case unsubstantiated. Back at school, Clara waited. She watched Emily grow paler, quieter. One day she passed her in the hallway and whispered, "You can talk to me, any time." Emily nodded, but never came. At home, Susan confronted her. "Why are you telling people lies?" she snapped, slamming a drawer shut. "Do you know how dangerous that is? Robert has a job, a reputation." "I'm not lying," Emily said. Her voice cracked. "He comes into my room." Susan pointed a finger. "You're confused. You're reading into things. You need to stop before someone gets hurt." The silence that followed was louder than yelling. Emily retreated further. She stopped speaking unless spoken to. The girl who once filled pages with watercolors now filled pages with journal entries she had to hide under loose floorboards. Each entry was a scream written in ink. December 3rd. "Tried again. She said I was confused. I'm not. I'm terrified." December 7th. "He tried my door. I held it shut with both hands. I don't know how much longer I can live like this." December 11th. "Ms. Evans looked at me today like she knew. I wish I could tell her. I can't. I'm alone." The thing about small towns is they love stories with neat bows. They like heroes and sinners, not gray areas, not invisible wars inside ordinary homes. So when Emily stopped smiling, people assumed she was just another teen. When she stopped attending club meetings, they blamed laziness. When she stood frozen in class during a fire drill, they rolled their eyes. Only Clara kept watching. One day, she left a folded note inside Emily's locker, just a line. "If something's wrong, write it, fold it, leave it in my desk." It was never answered, but Emily kept the note in her pocket for weeks, creased, faded, clutched like a secret lifeline. Meanwhile, Robert remained the golden boy. At Friday's football game, he stood on the sidelines like a king. The crowd cheered when he waved. Parents brought him hot cocoa in thermoses with his name on them. He hugged students, threw pep talks like confetti. Everyone loved Robert, except the one person who truly knew him. One afternoon, Susan came home early. Rain soaked her jacket as she stepped through the door. She kicked off her shoes, called out for Robert. No answer. Emily's door was closed. Then she noticed it. Robert's jacket on the banister outside Emily's room. Her throat tightened. She walked past, didn't knock, didn't speak. That night, she said nothing, ate dinner, watched TV. But her hand trembled when she reached for the remote. Denial isn't blindness. It's a decision, a survival strategy. Susan told herself stories. He was probably just checking on her. I shouldn't jump to conclusions. Emily has always been dramatic. The stories worked for a little while. Until the night she found the journal. It was hidden beneath a floorboard in Emily's closet. Susan wasn't snooping, just looking for an old sweatshirt Emily borrowed. But when she pulled up the loose wood, she found it. A notebook, torn, pages dog-eared, her daughter's handwriting, dozens of entries, some with dates, others just raw paragraphs, descriptions of footsteps, of whispered threats, of being touched. Susan read 5 pages before she dropped it. No. She picked it up again. Read 10 more. She staggered into the hallway, sat on the floor. Then, slowly, deliberately, she walked to the kitchen and dropped the journal in the trash. She never told Emily she found it. Never spoke of it again. But that night, she lay in bed, eyes open, unable to sleep. Down the hall, Emily lay awake too, waiting for footsteps that never came. By January, the air inside the Harper house had changed. The holiday lights were gone, the wreath taken down. But it wasn't the season that shifted, it was something colder, heavier. Emily barely spoke now. Her eyes no longer searched for comfort. Her steps were quiet, deliberate. At 16, she looked years older, Her voice when she did speak was flat, toneless, her face unreadable. Susan noticed. She noticed the way Emily flinched when Robert entered the room, the way she held her breath when footsteps approached her door, the way she kept a chair wedged beneath the doorknob, even during the day. But Susan didn't speak. She folded laundry. She paid bills. She poured coffee and smiled when neighbors waved. She acted like everything was fine. Because saying something meant admitting something, and admitting it meant facing what she had allowed. Robert, meanwhile, grew bolder. Whatever suspicion Susan might have had, he didn't share it. He joked louder, drank more, walked shirtless around the house. Sometimes, when Susan wasn't home, he would sit in Emily's doorway, just sit legs stretched across the carpet until she told him to go. She never raised her voice. She never screamed. She knew it wouldn't matter. One night, Susan came home to find Robert asleep on the couch, empty beer bottles on the floor. Emily was in the kitchen, staring at the window like it might break open and set her free. Susan hesitated in the hallway. Something in her daughter's posture, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched, made her pause. She opened her mouth to say something. But then Robert snored loudly, and Susan sighed, stepped past, and said nothing. Emily didn't even turn around. That was the last time Susan saw the old Emily, the one who waited to be believed. Because after that night, Emily stopped hoping. She started preparing. She began by watching every move Robert made when he left the room, how many seconds it took for the faucet to fill a glass, which cabinet squeaked when opened too fast. She made notes inside her head on scraps of paper carved into the back of her school notebooks. She hid a second diary, this one in a hollowed-out book inside her closet. January 14th. She saw me shaking. I know she saw. She looked away. January 19th. He sat in my doorway again. Didn't say a word, just smiled. January 24th. I'm not scared anymore. I'm angry. The entry shifted. Less fear, more fire. At school, Ms. Evans kept trying. She cornered Emily one afternoon near the lockers. I know what you're carrying, she whispered. You don't have to carry it alone. Emily just shook her head. I'm fine. Clara didn't believe her. But what could she do? CPS had already closed the case. Susan had denied everything. Robert was still the town darling. What happens when the system fails and the adults look away? What's left? Back home, Susan started to notice little things. The way knives went missing from the drawer and reappeared days later. The way Emily moved through the house like a shadow, always watching, always measuring. Susan tried to tell herself she was imagining it, that Emily was just being a teenager, that Robert, whatever he was still her husband. Until the night she opened Emily's closet. She had gone looking for dirty laundry. The hamper was overflowing, and Emily had locked herself in her room again. Susan knocked, got no answer, and went in anyway. Inside the closet, tucked into an old science textbook, she found the second diary. It was worse than the first. Pages and pages of anguish, but not just pain this time, plans. Timelines, notes about Robert's behavior, maps of the house. One entry read, he takes 2 drinks before trying the door. Another! The knife in the second drawer is sharper. Susan dropped the notebook. It hit the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo for miles. She picked it up again, flipped through the pages. Her hands shook. She closed it and walked downstairs. She didn't confront Emily. She didn't say a word. Instead, she opened the fireplace, threw the diary in. and lit the match. Emily smelled the smoke an hour later. Her chest tightened. She ran downstairs. The fire was still glowing orange behind the screen. Susan was sitting on the couch, arms crossed. Emily didn't need to ask. She walked into the living room, staring straight at her mother. "You read it." Susan's face was unreadable. "You're losing yourself. Emily, this obsession, it's dangerous." "It's not an obsession," Emily said. "It's survival." Susan's eyes narrowed. "You need help." "I needed help 6 months ago," Emily snapped, "when I first told you." "Robert loves us." "He hurts me." The scream echoed through the house like a gunshot. Susan stood up, her face twisted with something between rage and fear. "You don't say things like that. You don't lie like that." Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm not lying. You're just afraid it's true." They stared at each other. Two women, mother and daughter, divided by silence and ash. That night, Emily didn't cry. She sat at her desk with a single sheet of paper. She drew the kitchen, cabinet, drawer, knife. She folded it, hid it under her mattress. She wasn't planning murder, not yet. But she was done being hunted. Robert came home late again 2 nights later. Susan was working overnight. Emily was already in bed, door locked, chair in place. She heard him on the stairs, heard him pause, heard him walk away. She didn't sleep. The next morning, she found a note under her door. "You're different lately. You're getting cold. I liked you better soft." No signature, no name. But Emily knew. She held the note until it crumpled in her hand. And in that moment, something inside her finally broke. Not with tears. With clarity. She wrote one last diary entry. January 29th. She burned everything. She still won't see me. I'm done waiting. I will not die in this house. She closed the book, tucked it in a vent behind her dresser, and began to prepare. The night it happened, the air was razor sharp. Outside, Willow Creek was wrapped in silence, just a gentle wind brushing bare trees, the distant hum of tires over damp pavement, but inside the Harper house a storm was building. Emily knew this night was different. She felt it in her bones. Susan was working another overnight shift. The hospital called earlier that day to ask if she could stay late. She didn't hesitate. Emily hadn't tried to stop her. She just nodded. "Okay, Mom." Then she checked the knife drawer. The second one? The sharpest one? Still there. She closed it slowly, her fingers trembling. By 10:43 p.m., Emily was in her room, lights off, hoodie on. Her phone screen glowed dimly. No texts, no calls. Just the note still saved in her drafts. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." She didn't send it. Instead, she slid the phone under her pillow and waited. 11:08, 11:27, 11:44. Floorboards creaked. Her entire body tensed. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times, not to hurt him, not to kill, just to make him stop, to show him she wasn't scared anymore, that he couldn't take from her without consequence. But that's not how monsters work. They don't stop until you make them. Robert was drunk. She could smell the whiskey before she even heard him. The sound of a zipper, a heavy footstep, a soft chuckle. "Emily," he called, voice smooth. too smooth. Her heart was in her throat. Open the door. She didn't move. He jiggled the handle. It was locked, as always. The chair was wedged tight beneath it, but tonight he didn't walk away. Instead, he pounded once, twice, louder the third time. Don't make me ask again. Emily closed her eyes. Waited. Silence. Then footsteps, retreating. Her breath released, shaky. But she didn't relax. She stood, moved toward the door, pressed her ear against it. She didn't hear the stairs. She didn't hear the couch. Which meant she opened the door. Empty hallway. The kitchen light was on. That's when she knew he was waiting. Her hands were shaking as she reached into the closet, behind the bookshelf. The sketch from weeks ago lay out of the kitchen, paths, hiding places still there. She grabbed it. Grabbed the knife. Held it for a long moment. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, pale, hollow-eyed, 16, but nothing like a child. She whispered to herself, "You don't have to die here." Then stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet, too quiet. She moved slowly, barefoot on wood, the sound of her own breath loud in her ears. She passed the living room dark. Robert wasn't there. Then the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter, sipping from a glass. He didn't even flinch. "Took you long enough?" he said. Emily didn't answer. He eyed the knife. "What's that for?" She didn't blink. "Stay away from me." He smirked, or what? For a second, just a second, he stepped forward. And Emily moved. It wasn't grace. It wasn't training. It was raw instinct. She swung the knife up, hand trembling. He grabbed her wrist. They struggled. She twisted. He cursed. She pushed. He slipped. And then the blade went in. She didn't remember how many times. Once, twice more. All she remembered was the way his expression changed from smug to stunned. Then the way his knees buckled. And the silence that followed. He lay there, mouth open, blood spreading like ink on the floor. Emily stepped back, knife still in her hand, her whole body shaking. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you to stop." He didn't answer. He wouldn't ever again. For a long time, she just stood there. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the distant wind outside. Then headlights swept across the living room wall. "Susan. Home early." Emily didn't hide the knife. She didn't run. She just stood there when Susan opened the door. And Susan screamed. "What did you do?" Emily didn't flinch. He wouldn't stop, she said. Susan's eyes went wide. She looked at the blood, at Robert, at her daughter. And then, at the knife. This can't be happening," Susan whispered. But it was. Emily dropped the knife, took one step back, and said the only thing left to say. "I warned you." The sirens shattered the silence at 2:03 a.m. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights painted Maple Street like a crime scene straight from television. Neighbors peered from the windows, robes pulled tight, murmuring to one another, "That's the Harper house. That can't be right. That girl." She was always so quiet. Inside, the kitchen smelled of metal and fear. Robert Harper lay face down in a pool of blood. The chef's knife rested inches from his fingertips. His eyes were open, but they saw nothing. Susan knelt beside his body, sobbing, rocking back and forth, arms useless in the aftermath. Emily sat slumped against the wall, knees to her chest, face pale and blank. Her hoodie was stained dark red near the cuffs, her hand still trembling slightly, but her eyes were dry. Her breathing was steady. The panic was long gone. 2 officers entered first, weapons drawn, hands where we can see them, one shouted. Emily didn't resist. She raised her hands slowly, then whispered, "I did it." Another officer knelt beside Robert, pressed 2 fingers to his neck, then shook his head. "He's gone." Detective Mark Reynolds arrived 10 minutes later. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes, 20 years on the force. The kind of man who'd seen every kind of homicide and knew when something didn't sit right. He stepped into the kitchen, took in the body, the knife, the girl, the mother on the floor. Then, quietly, secure the scene. Nobody leaves until we get statements. Emily was handcuffed. Her small frame looked even smaller as she stood. One officer gently guided her outside to a squad car. As she passed her mother, she didn't say a word. Susan looked up only once just as the car door closed. Her daughter was gone. The house buzzed with activity. Forensics swept the kitchen. Cameras flashed. Evidence markers dotted the bloodied floor. Photos of the knife. The position of the body. The spatter on the wall. Officers whispered among themselves. "Kid did this. He's a big guy. How'd she manage that?" In the living room, Reynolds sat down across from Susan, who was wrapped in a blanket, eyes glassy. "What happened tonight?" Susan stared past him into nothing. "I came home early, found them. She killed him." "Did you see it happen?" "No, I walked in after." "Did you know there was a problem between them?" Susan hesitated. Her lip trembled. "She said things. She said he was hurting her." Reynolds' pen paused. "Did you believe her?" Susan looked away. I thought she was making it up. Teenagers lie." Reynolds nodded slowly. "But not usually about that." Down at the station, Emily was booked. Fingerprints, mugshot, clothes bagged for evidence. She didn't cry, didn't scream. When asked if she wanted a lawyer, she simply said yes. Then she sat alone in the interview room, silent, arms folded tightly around herself, staring at the table. Reynolds entered an hour later. He didn't bring cuffs or threats, just a folder and a quiet voice. "I'm not here to yell," he said. "I just want to know what happened." Emily looked at him. For the first time, her eyes flickered, not with fear, but with exhaustion. "I told her," she whispered. "I told my mom months ago. She didn't believe me." Reynolds nodded. He'd heard versions of this story before, but rarely this quiet, this calm. "What did he do?" Emily's voice was barely audible. "He came into my room when she worked late. He'd sit at the door, then come in." She paused. "Sometimes he touched me. Sometimes he just watched." Reynolds didn't flinch. He wrote down every word. "Did you plan to kill him?" Emily shook her head. "I planned to survive." He believed her. Back at the house, a tech team searched Emily's room, under the bed, between the slats. A technician found a scrap of paper just a few inches across, torn, nearly missed. It read, October 28th. He came again. I begged him to stop. Mom won't listen. Reynolds stared at the paper, his jaw clenched. He took it to Susan, who sat in the hallway, shaking. "Did you see this?" She nodded slowly. "There were more. I found her diary. I threw it away." "Why?" "I thought it was all lies." Reynolds held up the fragment. "Still think so?" Susan didn't answer. The next morning, the story broke. Local headlines read, "Beloved coach, killed by stepdaughter. Willow Creek shocked by teen's confession. Tragedy in the Harper home." But whispers followed quickly that Emily had tried to tell someone, that there were signs, that nobody listened. Miss Clara Evans was the first to speak publicly. "I filed a report months ago," she told a reporter. "No one followed up. I saw the bruises. I saw the poetry. I knew something was wrong." Other teachers chimed in. Students posted cryptic messages on social media, subtle support for Emily. Vague, but undeniable. And Reynolds dug deeper. In the garage, buried beneath holiday boxes, they found a trash bag Susan had missed. Inside were shredded notebook pages, dozens of them. The writing was unmistakably Emily's. November 5th. He tried the door again. I held it shut. November 12th. Told Mom. She called me a liar. December 3rd. He touched my leg. I froze. Every entry was a scream, a record, a chronicle of a girl trying to stay alive while the world looked away. Reynolds added it to the evidence. This wasn't a cold-blooded killing. This was survival. And someone, maybe a jury, needed to hear that. Spring arrived in Willow Creek, but nothing felt lighter. The air was warm. The grass turned green again. Yet the Harper house remained quiet, its windows closed, its lawn overgrown, its reputation ruined. 6 months had passed since the night Robert Harper bled out on the kitchen floor. Now, Emily Harper, age 17, sat in a courtroom, facing a charge of second-degree murder. She wore a plain gray dress, her hair tied back neatly. Her hands were folded on her lap, but her fingers twitched, restless, anxious, around her. The courtroom buzzed with reporters, neighbors, and strangers. The story had gone national. Teen girl kills stepdad in suburb nightmare. Some called her a murderer. Some called her a survivor. But the law only cared about one thing: guilt or innocence. The prosecution painted Emily as cold, calculating. Assistant District Attorney Karen Holt called her diary a manipulative narrative, claiming Emily had exaggerated everything to justify murder. She described the killing as excessive, brutal, and intentional. She stabbed him multiple times. Holt said, "She didn't run. She didn't call the police. She executed him. They showed the knife, the blood." They read texts from Emily's phone, none of which directly proved abuse, but enough to cast doubt. She was angry. She planned it. And she followed through. The defense fought back hard. Emily's attorney, Rachel Nguyen, didn't play to sympathy, she played to fact. Emily was 16, she said. She tried to report the abuse. She told her mother. She wrote it down. And every adult who should have protected her failed. Nguyen brought out the notebook fragments recovered from the trash. She called Miss Clara Evans to the stand. Clara's voice broke as she recalled the poem, the bruises, the unreturned locker note. "I saw her fading," Clara said, "and I knew something terrible was happening. I tried." She wiped her eyes. The courtroom shifted. The jury took notes. Emily stared down at the floor. Then came the moment no one expected. Susan Harper was called to testify. She looked older, grayer, smaller. The confident nurse from a year ago had vanished. Now she sat with her hands in her lap. Voice quivering, Holt asked, "Did your daughter ever tell you that Robert was abusing her?" Susan answered, "Yes." A murmur rippled through the room. Holt pressed, "What did you do?" Susan looked down. "I didn't believe her." "Why not?" "Because I was afraid it was true. And if it was, then I failed her." Holt looked satisfied. But then Nguyen stood. "Did you ever find Emily's diary?" Susan nodded. "Did you destroy it?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I didn't want it to be real." Nguyen stepped forward. "Do you believe her now?" Silence. Susan choked on her answer. "Yes," she whispered. The jury stared at her. No more questions. Then came the diary, not just read aloud, but projected. Page after page of raw entries scrolled across a screen. Dates, descriptions. Fear in ink. "He's outside my door. Mom won't listen. I don't want to die." Jurors leaned forward. Some covered their mouths. One wiped away tears. The court clerk's voice, steady and neutral, read words that were anything but. By the time the last page faded, the room was silent. Reynolds testified too. He showed evidence of CPS in action, the note under Emily's bed, the trash bag in the garage. He told the court, this wasn't premeditated, it was desperation. The prosecution objected. The judge let it stand. The media had a field day. TV crews lined the courthouse steps. Think pieces exploded across the internet. Did the system kill Robert Harper? Emily Harper and the cost of not listening, monster or martyr. Public opinion split sharply. Some still called her a murderer, a manipulator. Others called her a symbol. She did what she had to do. One woman said on the news, "If the law won't protect you, what choice do you have?" In the final days of trial, Emily never took the stand. Nguyen said it would do more harm than good. She's already told the world what happened. She said, she wrote it down. That's her voice. The closing arguments were brutal. Holt accused the defense of weaponizing sympathy. "This is murder," she shouted, "nothing less." Nguyen responded calmly, "This is survival," and everyone who ignored her made it inevitable. The jury deliberated for 3 days. The courtroom sat in limbo. Susan waited outside, pacing. Clara brought flowers. Reporters asked every passerby, "What do you think the verdict will be?" And then, on a Friday afternoon thick with heat, the jury filed in. Emily stood. The foreman read the verdict. Not guilty. The words rang through the courtroom like thunder. Emily blinked. Her knees almost buckled. Rachel Nguyen grabbed her arm gently, steadying her. Susan let out a gasp, half sob, half relief, and then silence. Even the reporters didn't move right away. For a full 3 seconds, the entire room just held still. Then a rustle, cameras clicking, people whispering. Emily sat down slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just stared ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. Her whole body was shaking, but her eyes were dry. After everything, after police lights, handcuffs, fingerprints, testimonies, and projections of her trauma across 20 feet of courtroom wall, she was free. But freedom doesn't always feel like release. Outside the courthouse, Rachel spoke to the press. Justice isn't always tidy. She said, this was never about vengeance. It was about survival. And today, survival won. Emily didn't speak. She kept her head low, her mother beside her, the world flashing cameras in her face. One reporter shouted, "Do you feel remorse, Emily?" Another asked, "Would you do it again?" She said nothing, not because she was defiant, but because no one really wanted the truth. She wasn't sorry. Not for surviving, The weeks after the verdict were surreal. Emily returned home, but not to the Harper house. That place had been sold. She and Susan moved into a modest rental on the other side of town. Different school district, different grocery store, a different kind of silence between them. Susan tried in the way mothers do after too much has been said or not said at all. She cooked dinner every night. She asked about homework. She offered to drive Emily to therapy. Emily nodded, ate what was served, said thank you, but they never talked about the blood, the night, the scream, the years before. Some wounds don't close. Some just stop bleeding. At school, Emily didn't walk into applause. She wasn't a hero. She was the girl from TV, the girl who stabbed her stepdad. Some teachers looked at her too long. Others avoided her eyes. One girl whispered in the hallway. I heard she cut off his and stopped when Emily turned, not angrily, not even cold, just empty. Emily walked on. No fights, no friends, just forward. Clara Evans stayed in touch. She sent postcards every month, handwritten, hopeful. Just checking in. Your strength still amazes me. If you ever want to talk, coffee's on me. No pressure. Emily never replied. But she kept every card. Rachel Nguyen visited once, just before leaving town for another case. She brought a book. The Body Keeps the Score, by Bessel van der Kolk. It might help, she said. Emily nodded. She never opened it. Not then. One rainy afternoon in October, Emily found herself walking the aisles of a thrift store. She didn't know why. She didn't need anything, but something about the quiet rows of old things that had belonged to someone else felt safe. She ran her fingers across a cracked teacup, a child's piano, a stack of used notebooks. She paused. Opened one. It was blank. She bought it. That night, she started writing again. Not about Robert. Not about her mom. Just thoughts. And slowly, something changed. She got a part-time job shelving books at the library. No one asked her name. She liked that. She could move between rows, anonymous, invisible, useful. Sometimes kids asked where the mystery section was. She smiled softly, pointed the way. They never knew, and that felt good. Susan never remarried. She never dated. She took extra shifts, made donations, sat in church every Sunday and sang with a voice that shook. People forgave her. In public. Anyway, some still whispered behind her back, but she didn't flinch. She just kept going. And Emily watched. Sometimes from across the room. Sometimes through the kitchen door. Always with a quiet question in her eyes. Do you see me now? She never got a real answer. But one night, Susan left a single envelope on Emily's bed. Inside a photo of Emily as a child, grinning, missing a front tooth. On the back, one sentence in Susan's handwriting. I'm sorry I didn't protect her. Emily didn't cry. She just held the photo for a long time. 3 years later, Emily left Willow Creek. Not in a blaze of glory. No viral video. No dramatic goodbye. Just a duffel bag, a bus ticket, and a note on the kitchen table. Thank you for trying. I need to try too. She moved 2 states away, changed her last name, enrolled in a community college, took writing classes, psychology, slept with the light on for 6 months. Then finally, didn't. Her first published essay was titled, The Things You Burn to Survive. It didn't mention her name. But everyone who read it felt her heartbeat in the pages. It went viral. People wrote in, survivors, mothers, daughters, teachers. One message read, "You gave me the courage to leave. Thank you." Emily didn't reply. She just printed it and taped it to her wall. Because in the end, Emily Harper didn't want revenge. She didn't want fame. She just wanted the world to know silence is not the same as peace. And surviving doesn't mean the story ends. Sometimes it's only the beginning. By 24, Emily had learned to speak again, not loudly, not all at once, but with words that mattered. She led workshops for survivors, not as a therapist, but as someone who knew what it meant to scream inside your own skin. She never introduced herself with her full name. She didn't need to. When she stood in front of that room, posters of healing on the wall, folding chairs arranged in cautious half-circles, they saw her, a girl once buried beneath doubt, now quietly helping others claw their way out. One evening, after a particularly long session, a woman stayed behind, mid-40s, nervous hands, rings removed. She clutched a worn backpack to her chest and whispered, "How did you know when it was time to leave?" Emily looked at her. "When staying meant I wouldn't survive." The woman nodded slowly, then cried. Emily didn't say anything else. She just sat beside her. Sometimes presence is more powerful than advice. Later that night, Emily walked home alone. It had rained. The streets reflected amber light from overhead lamps. She passed shuttered stores and sleeping dogs and a man strumming a broken guitar outside the corner diner. The world was quiet, and so was she. But it was the kind of silence she had chosen. In her apartment, books lined the walls, fiction, memoir, poetry, trauma studies. Her writing desk stood by the window. On it, a stack of letters she hadn't sent. Most were addressed to Susan, some to herself. One simply said, "I believe you now." Another, "I'm still afraid of closed doors." She didn't throw them away. She just kept them close. Back in Willow Creek, time had moved on, but the name Emily Harper still lingered like fog over the town. Her old high school added a mandatory safety and disclosure course after her trial. Teachers were trained differently. Social workers actually followed up. One bulletin board in the counselor's office bore a handwritten sign. "You are not invisible. You are not alone." Below it, a quote from an anonymous essay. "If no one believes you, write anyway." Everyone knew where it came from. No one said it aloud. Susan Harper never stopped attending support groups. She never stopped lighting a candle every May. And she never stopped trying, in small, quiet ways, to make peace with the girl she didn't believe. She once donated to a shelter under the name A Mother Who's Learning. The thank you card now sat framed above her fireplace. She never remarried, but she did forgive herself. Eventually, years passed. Emily published a book. It was called Quiet Fire Notes from a Girl Who Survived. It wasn't a memoir, it was a mosaic, fragments of experience, pain, rage, healing, hope. Some pages were only a sentence long, some were blackout poems made from old legal documents. The final page was blank. On purpose. In the back, no author photo. Just a note. "This isn't about me. It's about anyone who's been told their pain was imaginary." Critics called it devastating and brilliant. But survivors just called it honest. One morning, Emily opened her inbox and found a message with no subject. It simply read, "You don't know me, but I read your book in a motel bathroom while my daughter slept on the bed. I left that night. Because of you." Emily stared at the screen for a long time. Then she hit print and taped it next to the others. Right above the line, I'm still afraid of closed doors. Because stories don't end at verdicts. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. And sometimes, survival is the loudest thing a girl can do.